Hey, what's up, everybody? Ben Standig here with my boy Chase Hughes. I guess technically we're still calling this college basketball live, even though college basketball doesn't really exist right now. So we're going to be focusing more on the college guys going to the next level, which is the NBA. What do you think about that?
Well, as an NBA fan, I always kind of watch college basketball with that perspective, trying to see who's going to be good at the next level, and I know you do too as well.
It's almost kind of sad on some level. That's almost how I almost only look at it now, because college basketball, especially like focusing on Georgetown, the regular season, it doesn't really mean that much for the most part. It only really matters what happens in March. So you really have to focus on 3 weeks. But yeah, over the course of the year, you're like, oh, well, that guy's going to go pro even though he just showed up.
Right, and with the one and dones, you already have an idea of like what the top 10 is going to be heading into a year.
Yeah.
Just one plus to that rule, I guess.
Not to backtrack, but I just CBS put out their preseason All-American list today
for next year.
On the first 3 teams, I believe I saw 4 or 5 freshmen who haven't played yet.
Yeah.
On the list, so that tells you both how good this class is supposed to be coming in, but also how poor college basketball is right now. There's not much left behind, sadly.
And sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong. I remember Harrison Barnes was the unanimous All-American preseason, and that didn't. I mean, he was a fantastic player, but it didn't work out quite like that.
Yeah, no, but a couple of these guys are going to pretty much have to walk on water to meet the expectations being put on them. It'll be interesting to see. All right, but let's talk.
On that note, I think it's going to be a really fun year to watch next year. We're going to talk about the NBA prospects this year, but next year you're going to go into it knowing it's going to, or at least we think we know, it's going to be a very special NBA class the following summer. So I feel like it's almost every few years we see a guy like Kevin Durant who doesn't even belong in college basketball. We might get that same feeling watching Wiggins and Parker this coming year. I feel like we still haven't seen, since they instituted the one and done, we still haven't seen like a Dwight Howard or LeBron James where they literally have no business playing college basketball, but they're forced to because of this rule. So maybe we'll get that this year.
I guess Anthony Davis was kind of close because he was so ridiculously dominant, but you're right, he wasn't physically dominant. He was just so athletic in the shot blocking. Kentucky had so many guys.
Blake Griffin did it, but it was his sophomore year.
Yeah.
Where he was averaging 13 rebounds and 25 points.
But I think it's also because there's so many guys coming in next year who are projected to be high lottery picks that pretty much everybody this year who potentially was going to be lottery bolted.
Except for Marcus Smart.
Yeah, Marcus Smart, the Oklahoma State point guard, only guy that left, which is kind of a bummer for the Wizards because even though the Wizards you wouldn't think would take a point guard anywhere they fall in the lottery, somebody else would. So now instead of this guy going possibly first, second, third, somebody else is going to go there. And the draft isn't until June 27th, so we've got a ways to go, almost 2 months. And I'm sure the order and how the perception of these players is currently will change. With that said, right now, I don't know, it's kind of looking at me like maybe it's a 7-player draft. And the Wizards, if the order doesn't change at all, are going to pick 8. So,
right. So, I mean, especially with Smart going out, he would have made it kind of an 8-player draft. And I think one thing that may happen is once they go through the combine and these guys, we get the measurables, maybe Michael Carter-Williams could move up. I think Trey Burke's going to move up into that top 8 conversation. But maybe some of these teams that need a guard that normally would have picked the Marcus Smart, maybe not at the same slot. Maybe if they lose the lottery and they go back to 6 or 7, maybe they'll take a chance on one of those guys and it'll help out the Wizards.
By the way, as I'm looking in the camera, I noticed that our dress code is completely off.
Yeah.
It's essentially my fault. I'm a little too dressed up today. This is the normal attire, but so whatever. It is what it is. It's a little bit of an odd couple scenario, but I want the time.
So who are your 7 players? If you call it a 7-player draft, who are your 7 guys?
For me, it would be in some order: Nerlens Noel, center from Kentucky; Ben McLemore, shooting guard, Kansas; Victor Oladipo, wing guard from Indiana, who played at Matha; Georgetown's Otto Porter, who we know; Trey Burke, Michigan. I don't necessarily see that, but it seems like everybody else does that he's considered the number 1 point guard in the draft. Your boy
Anthony Bennett.
Your boy Anthony Bennett from UNLV. And I'll say Shabazz Muhammad from UCLA, although he seems to be sort of a wild card to me. There's a couple guys who are wild cards, but he seems to be a big one where his stock could go really high into the top 5, or I could see people finding negative.
But I've seen him as low as 10.
Yeah, I think on DraftExpress.com, I think he was number 11.
Yeah, number 11.
But and other people have variations. I've seen Cody Zeller from Indiana jump into the top 5 or 6. I've seen Maryland's Alex Len that high, but I've seen those guys back as well. I suspect in time, Len, we may have talked about this on a different podcast, that Len, once he goes through the evaluation process, he's going to measure out very well. People are going to fall in love with a 7-footer who's crazy athletic.
With the wingspan that he has.
And he's got a better shooting touch than he showed at Maryland because they needed him obviously to play inside a lot. I think he's probably going to go up. And again, I've said this before, even though I love Otto Porter the player, I fear that he's not a tremendous athlete. He's not a guy that's going to blow you away.
Right.
And how do I say this nicely? I wonder how he's going to perform in the interview process. He's not just because a guy isn't a great quote when he deals with the media doesn't mean he can't do the interview process. But I do kind of wonder if maybe he's maybe on the young side of being a sophomore. I wonder how that would hurt him. With that said, he's not going to fall outside of the lottery or even probably the top 6, 7, or 8 picks. Anyway, but if it doesn't change, if it is sort of where I said, the Wizards are sort of in this weird spot of they may be possibly just on the outside of the top group. But here's my problem. I don't know what you think, because you like some of these guys think more than I do. If you said to me right now, who do you want? Give this guy to the Wizards, that's going to solve their problem. I don't know if I see anybody, because they need essentially a stretch 4, they need some sort of scoring off the bench from a perimeter player, either a small forward or a shooting guard. Nobody's jumping out at me going, that guy's definitely there.
Now, it's interesting to me, the Wizards right now, correct me if I'm wrong, they have the 8th best lottery odds, but they can move up to one of the top 3 positions.
Correct. They can go 1, 2, 3, or they can go 8, 9, 10, 11.
I think on paper, Nerlens Noel fits the best. He's probably going to go number 1. He's 6'11" and can block shots. He's an athletic guy who would look good in their defense and running the fast break. But because of those injury concerns, I think the best case scenario for the Wizards is they get the 3rd pick. Noel, someone else takes that risk, and someone else goes with McLemore, because I don't think they would pick McLemore anyway. So he's redundant with Bradley Beal. Then they can work out everyone else and pick the best player, basically beyond those 2 guys.
I mean, that works out. I don't. Well, the problem with Noel is, I think he would be a good pick for them for the long term. For the moment, I don't know if he really does a lot, because he's basically a younger version of Okafor, not much of a scorer, but plays defense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Like your boy Anthony Bennett, you love this guy. Is he a stretch 4? He's 6'7". I mean, he's still young enough that maybe he's still going to grow. But the question is, is he going to be able to play a real power forward position? Because it doesn't seem like he's quick enough to play small forward.
See, I think he's going to be basically in between small forward, power forward. I think when he's younger, he's going to be able to play small forward. He's very fast for his size. He weighs 240, 245, something like that. I look at him almost, this is kind of an abstract comparison, but almost as a mix between DeJuan Blair, because he's a more athletic DeJuan Blair, and Blake Griffin, because he's a less athletic Blake Griffin. So a guy those guys in this day and age in the NBA, where big men have become shorter but more athletic, they can work. I think he'll get rebounds. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, but he's more athletic than you think, and I think he would fit in pretty well, playing small forward with Okafor and Nene down low, and maybe developing into a power forward just because he's got the size and can box people out.
The Wizards don't have to solve all their problems in the draft. They don't have really any salary cap flexibility, but they do have the mid-level exemption, which I think it's about $5.1 million to use this year. They've got the smaller exemption, which is around $2 million. They obviously can re-sign some of their own guys. If they bring back Webster, if they bring back AJ Price, if they bring back Garrett Temple, that takes care of a good chunk of their bench. They still would have, though, that spot behind Beal. And I don't know what they're going to do up front between Singleton, Vesely, and Booker. You probably have to get rid of at least one of them. So I think here's what I think with the draft. We just got done with the NFL draft, and there's always that debate: do you take need versus the best player? And I think in the NFL concept, it gets blown out. I don't even think people understand really what that means, because the perception is if you take need, you're taking a lesser player than the best player. But the notion of taking the best player is best player based on whose opinion. I mean,
right.
It's not like just one universal list. In the NBA, though, I think you almost, especially this year, I think you almost just have to take the best player, because the notion of need one, like I said, there's not a guy who's an obvious fit, and the NBA is such a the individual player means a lot more than it does in the NFL. If you get a guy who can be one of your top 6 players, I don't care where he plays, it doesn't almost matter. So they have to just figure out who is the best player and go with that almost more than they have to get power forward, they have to get a wing guard.
Right, unless it's Trey Burke. I think that's one guy you can kind of rule out they're not taking. But here's a question. Say the Wizards are at 8 and a guy like Oladipo falls. I don't think he would fall, but imagine he's there. He's the best player on the board by far, but he plays a position where he doesn't really fit into your starting lineup. Do you think you take it?
Yeah, I mean,
or say you're choosing between him and his teammate Cody Zeller. Do you go with someone like Zeller, or do you take Oladipo, who I think clearly is going to be a better NBA player, but he doesn't necessarily fit in?
If I say I would take you over Cody Zeller, I don't even mean as a dish. I want to be clear. I'm not actually putting the two of you in the same category. I think you're better than he is.
Right.
I don't want Cody Zeller. Yeah, I mean, Oladipo. I mean, is he a scorer off the bench? Probably not initially, but they do need play. He would be able to play the backup position. He's good defensively. And again, I mean, if they draft, the draft comes before free agency. So if they draft whatever, they can fill some other needs, in free agency. I mean, they'll obviously have some sense of what's available and who they can get. But yeah, I mean, I really do think it comes down to that. The question I've had, again, this may have come up here before, is what do you do with Alex Len? If he's sitting there at whatever position they draft, and he's the best player there, I mean, on the one hand, he might be the stretch forward that they need, because he can shoot a little bit. He is athletic. He's played college, so you have some sense of what he can do on that level. But Wizards have had terrible luck drafting international big men, and I guarantee, even though he's from Maryland, not that you're going to make the pick based on the fans, but I don't know how well that's going to go over. That to me is the most interesting guy, just from that concept on the board.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of people around here have watched Len closely over the last 2 years, and almost every game he'll show you something that you're like, wow, this guy's going to be a great player. But then he disappears in games. He does a lot of things I feel like that project as an NBA bust. Now maybe he'll find his consistency playing in the NBA, but in the NBA it comes down to a lot of it comes down to having that effort in an early January game or a late April game if your team's not winning. Right? And we'll see if Alex Len can do that. I'm not sure.
I think one of the questions that I'm going to try to find out over the next few weeks as we start prepping for the draft and writing about it on CSN Washington is how do people think that Maryland's lack of point guard play mess with Len? I mean, that's a common theme in college basketball. Big men to some degree are only as good as the guys getting them the ball.
Right.
Maryland's point guard play was pretty terrible last year for the most part, or at least inconsistent. So that couldn't help. And
say what you want about John Wall and what type of player you think he's going to be. He's really good at passing the ball and getting it down low. One of the best in the game already.
Right. And also, I mean, between Wall and Beal and Nene, that's three guys who are pretty heady, guys who know how to play the game, so to speak, how to move the ball around. That was one of the things when the Wizards started winning games, they had enough guys on the court who could do that. So I think if Len could get there.
All Len has to do is throw a ball off the backboard in the Wizards workouts, and Ernie Grunfeld will draft him.
So okay, since we're down this Len path, it's an obvious fit or obvious comparison, Len versus Jan Vesely. Now, we didn't see Jan Vesely play at the college level, so it's hard. It's all we've ever seen him is struggle. I've never seen a confident version of Jan Vesely. And from all I can see, and at the end of the season, the players said as much, and Randy Whitman, that with Vesely, it's not a matter of working on his jump shot. It's not a matter of working on his ball handling skills. It's all here.
Right. I think didn't AJ Price say that Vesely's told him in his own words, it's about confidence.
Yeah, like he doesn't want to go to the free throw line because he's afraid that he's going to miss and everybody's watching him.
Yeah.
So when you look at that's the thing with Len. So how much of the inconsistency is there? Any lack of confidence? I don't really think it's that. And in that's why I don't know if anybody wants to make the comparison. I don't know if it exists. I'm still a sucker. I still say Vesely has a role in the league, which is also maybe why you don't take Len. If you're going to keep Vesely, which I suspect they would, then both of those guys are sort of the same to some degree. Len's a better offensive player, but it's kind of stylistically. So in that sense, I don't know if Len would actually make sense.
Think about this in terms of Len. He didn't come into college with nearly the same height, and it wasn't the exact same situation. But look how much better Andre Drummond is in the NBA than he was in college. A 7-footer that athletic. Maybe Alex Len is more suited for the NBA than college. Maybe his skills, especially with a point guard like John Wall, would just, automatically click. And it's something that just never really came out of Maryland. You never know. That's the risk, right?
At his press conference to announce that he was going pro, I forget the exact question, but somebody asked him, "Are you excited to go to the NBA when you're not going to face double and triple teams?" And I think his response was, "Exactly."
Really?
and that's the thing. I mean, at Maryland, he was the main focus for defenses. If he went even for a team like the Wizards, not the most, they don't have a LeBron or a Kobe, but between Wall, Beal, Nene alone, Len is you do what you want to do. Nobody's going to guard him.
Right. And one thing I'll say about Len in terms of the Wizards is at least he's not a small forward trapped in that body. At least he's not going to grab a rebound and try to take it coast to coast himself or shoot 3-pointers like Andre Bloch used to do.
I was going to say, we were watching JaVale McGee videos earlier.
I don't think that's the concern.
No.
He likes to stay around the basket, at least shoot maybe a 10, 15-footer. But for the most part, he's not the toughest guy down low, but that's his game, back to the basket.
We're the NBA playoffs. We're still in the first round. I know you've got to watch it for work, and I've been doing the same. There's a lot of talk of, okay, the Wizards over the second half of the season, they definitely played a lot better. If you look at their record, when John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Nene all played together, which I think was only about 12 games or so, at least in the starting lineup, I think they were 10-2, I want to say. I should know this, but I think that's what it was. And, with Wall back, they were essentially a 500 team, maybe even slightly above, not counting the last couple games. But when you watch the playoffs, do you look at them and say, you know what? If the Wizards were in the playoffs, they actually, based on what we saw, could actually compete with these teams, or do you see that now that the game has been raised to that next level, that we're not ready?
Well, the one team they would try to supplant is the Milwaukee Bucks, and I think anyone could have done as well as they did against the Heat. But I think the Wizards, when healthy as it stands, are a playoff team. I think a 7 or 8 seed, but that's such a big if. When healthy, no team stays healthy throughout the whole season. Someone's going to get injured, and if you're one injury away from not being a playoff team, then you're essentially not a playoff team. But I think the thing about the Wizards is that they, it's basically incomplete when you're making that judgment at this point, because they're going to likely get a top 10 pick. If they hit on that, and if they use a little bit of them, I don't think they're going to have a lot of money in free agency, are they? They still have some big contracts on the books.
Yeah, no, they won't have much of them.
Right. So they're still going to add. They're going to make some tweaks. So I think later in the summer it'll be a little bit easier to say, but they're going to have to get deeper, and obviously that's going to be a goal.
In terms of here's the thing: in the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NHL, making the playoffs is a big deal because we've seen in all those sports teams that were the last seeded team and whatever.
Way more parity.
Yeah, they can make a run to win it. In the NBA, there's definite tiers, and even if the Wizards were to make the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed, the reality of them beating the Heat or the Knicks, as currently constituted, is unlikely. They actually beat both of those teams during the season,
right?
But over a 7-game series, it's not likely. So that's a sort of a topic for down the line. Is where all the focus is on getting into playoffs. Then the real question is winning, doing actually something to get deep. And I don't know if even the team like Atlanta Hawks and Indiana Pacers, I don't know if those teams can get there, and they're clearly ahead of where the Wizards are.
Here's what I'll say about that, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people saying, well, even as the team stands, their ceiling is still a 4 or 5 seed. Well, the difference between them and say like the Atlanta Hawks as of now is that they don't have their best players tied up into a lot of money. Right now, there's money on the books, but those guys like Ariza and Okafor are going to come off after next season, I believe. So they're going to have to sign John Wall to the contract. But Beal, you already know, is a good player. He's only going to get better. He's only 19. So they're going to have a young nucleus and the ability to go out and sign a free agent. Hopefully, we'll see what free agents come out that class. But they're also going to have the opportunity. They have to hit on this pick, I think, this top 10 pick. That's why I would kind of draft more towards ceiling, just because if you can hit big, that's the only way you're really going to not just be competing for the playoffs, but be competing for something much bigger. And the foundation pretty much has to be laid now.
Right. And so in terms of the teams in the playoff, Milwaukee is not looking likely to get back next year. At the moment, they don't have a head coach. They canned their interim coach today. Brandon Jennings is a free agent. I'm guessing he's not excited about going back there.
Right.
Monte Ellis can opt out of his deal, so if he does that, or J.J. Redick is a free agent.
They don't have Bogut anymore.
Right. So they're looking like they're going to take a step back.
Oh yeah,
anyway.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Then you got even Atlanta. Well, okay, the Celtics are the 7th seed. I mean, are they going to bring back Garnett? Obviously they get back Rondo next year at some point, but that's still an older team, and they may be better than the Wizards to a degree, but I think the Wizards could almost still finish ahead of them in the standings. Regardless, the Celtics don't scare me like they did. Atlanta, Josh Smith is a free agent. Devin Harris is a free agent, and that team is just a constantly. Kyle Korver also a free agent, so that's a good chunk of their starting lineup that may not be back. The Bulls should obviously be better. Derrick Rose is back.
Yeah.
The Nets, in theory, another year together with that core, so maybe the top 4 in the East is sort of set. But and Indiana's still good, so I think there's definitely a chance for the Wizards to get in. But like you said, health is a big thing, and
right.
You know.
Here's what I'll say. Another thing, looking long term with the Wizards. Right now, I think the foundation's there to compete for the playoffs next year. I think we both kind of agree on that, right? They're at least going to be able to compete. So it's all about if they get there to make that next step, whether they'll have enough. But if you look at the championship teams, especially the last 10 years, none of them were really built through the draft. I know the Spurs, whenever they won the last championship, was it 04 or 07, I think?
Yeah.
But, the Celtics did it through trades. The Miami Heat obviously didn't draft all of their best players. Right. The Lakers didn't either, besides trading for Kobe on draft night. The Wizards are eventually going to have to bring in someone that isn't drafted to put them over the top. The Thunder made the finals last year, but they didn't win a title until you win. The teams that win titles, I feel like, have to do it, pretty much use everything possible to put it together.
There's so much weird that's gone on with this franchise for the last 1,000 years. But some of the weirdest part to me is how they cannot attract. For some reason, this is not considered apparently a destination city for free agents,
even when they have money.
I don't understand that. The only guy that they've attracted in the last X many years has been Gilbert Arenas, and he wasn't. He became
a max player,
but he wasn't. He was a good player when they got him with potential.
Right.
But he exceeded that contract big
right.
time, and he was, he's a quirky guy anyway. But it's weird, because I agree with you. The ideal scenario is Wall keeps developing. Beal, who I really love, is going to take another jump. Nene can just stay healthy, and if they can then, I don't have a specific name, but some free agent says, hey, you know what? I want to hitch my wagon to that team in that city, and yet I don't see that happening.
Right, and it's a great city to live. I feel like for young athletes, and it's become a free agency destination for the other 3 major teams. It's always been for the Redskins, of course. The Capitals have been able to get free agents in the past, and now the Nationals can sign free agents. So whatever it is about the Wizards, I don't know. It's something about the franchise. But go ahead.
No. Yeah, no. I don't get that. So I haven't looked at. I've been doing some free agent looking at some free agents, and I haven't focused on guys like Chris Paul and Dwight Howard because that's not happening this year anyway for the Wizards. So I haven't looked ahead to 2 years, like you said, when
right.
before comes off the book. I'm not quite sure who's there yet. Hypothetically, LeBron might be, but I don't
right.
see him coming. I don't see him coming to the Wizards. And as stupid as it sounds, the fact that Barack Obama is in the White House, I would think that would help too.
That's definitely something I would think too. But hey, what they're going to be looking for at some point. You mentioned Dwight Howard is a big man, a 4 or a 5. Well, I don't know if Dwight Howard, on paper, obviously would fit. But if you're looking for a 4 and a 5, and you've got a young shooter, who I think is one of the better shooters we've seen come out of the draft in the last few years, and a young point guard who's pass first, right? What else would you want as a big man? You can get the money and have those 2 guys to play with.
I agree. If Beal and Wall keep, especially Beal to me, but if they, because I think we already sense what Wall is. Beal, I don't quite know how high he can go. If he can really get to some, high levels, and I think he might, that could be a crazy backcourt. Like you said, who wouldn't want to play with that? But yeah, we'll see. The NBA playoffs are still in the first round. You got any? It's already been a crazy first round. Russell Westbrook's out. We got the Grizzlies have won 3 straight. Denver and the Nets are both the higher seed, but in trouble still, even though they just won their last game. I assume we're all picking Miami at least to make the finals.
Right.
Would you care to offer a challenger, and will that challenger have any chance of winning?
I think it's all Miami, and personally, I'm one of those fans that think that's thinks that's unfortunate. As soon as Russell Westbrook got hurt, I pretty much wrote off this year's playoffs. I mean, I'm still gonna watch because I just look at the Nuggets Warriors series. It's great theater to watch, but no one's gonna step in their way. No one.
I love Tim Duncan, and my only hope is that the Spurs, if it's going to be them in the finals, that they are able to minimize the wear and tear on him and Parker Ginobili until they get to the finals. So that, because I think that team, they are tough-minded enough. Right. They could give Miami some problems to a degree. But, but if they're playing 7-game series the next 2 rounds, they're going to be worn out.
Speaking of length of series, you think the Heat are going to win the whole thing?
I would assume so.
All right, you're not going to bet on anyone else, right? Well, does anyone even push them to 6 games?
Yeah, I made some with a friend of mine a bet. Would they lose 2 games just in the East? And I said they wouldn't lose more than
2 total.
In the East. I don't think they lose more than 2 in the East. I think the Spurs should give them 6. Oklahoma City. I mean, we'll see what happens over the time. I just it just seems like as great as Durant is, Miami with LeBron and what else they have, they can slow him up enough. And Oklahoma City, I don't think has enough offense if Durant's not scoring 35 a game to get it done. So I don't see it being them at this point.
Yeah, a lot of people think that maybe either the Pacers or Knicks could have a chance, but I'm going to have to see that.
I mean, the Knicks, J.R. Smith is the kind of crazy player that can score 35 a night and think he's the best player on the court. Right. If he has those stretches, or if he is making the shots he thinks he can make, it could be interesting, but it's just hard to imagine. The only thing that could work against Miami, maybe, they've already had a sweep, now they've been sitting a while. And if the next series against the Bulls at this point, or the Nets, if that goes quick, then we could have issues as well. If they're sitting for a while, then who knows?
Yeah, I feel like the more that'll rest up D Wade, right?
Well, he didn't play in Game 4, so we could be sitting for a little while.
All right, well,
so we call it there.
Yeah.
One thing I just wanted to say as a sort of a semi-personal note, since we do a lot of college basketball, we did a lot of stuff at Georgetown this year. I just wanted to offer condolences to Georgetown. Bill Chaplin, the longtime SID, passed away end of this week. What's one of those behind-the-scenes deals? He basically was John Thompson Jr.'s PR guy for Ever in a Day. He's the guy that took all the heat when Thompson would do all the things that Thompson did, and then you sort of when you had the Hoya paranoia era, he was the guy that took all the bullets, as it were. He's still there the last couple of years when I've been covering the team, but in more of a reduced role. Nice guy. He used to. My personal story is that after media sessions, myself and a couple other reporters would sit in the parking lot and discuss the matters of the day about Georgetown and college basketball, and we would sit there forever. And he would come over to make fun of us about standing outside in the cold or whatever, and he would proceed to make fun of us for about 45 minutes because he ultimately, I guess, liked the banter as well. And anyway, again, condolences to Georgetown.
That's why Ben is actually dressed up. He was at the services today.
That is.
Yep.
All right. With that said, we'll be back here. Over the next couple weeks. We'll find out about 3 weeks when the actual order for the draft. Thank God, because then we can start actually doing mock drafts and having a sense of who's going to go where. Right now, we're just guessing.
I know the whole stretch out the calendar or whatever, but I really wish that the lottery odds were determined earlier. Maybe like a few days after the regular season ends.
It would be helpful. Although I guess if you're a college guy coming out and you see that like Charlotte, Sacramento, Toronto, or the top, like,
it has to be after that deadline for sure.
Right. All right, cool. We'll call it there. Thanks for watching. Ben Standig, Chase Hughes. We'll catch you later. See you.